Nothing seems more commonplace, more a part of our daily routine, or more ordinary than joint pain. And yet, when we consulted with Dr. Ovidiu Peneș, a distinguished doctor of medical sciences, he revealed something quite different to us. And usually the doctor examines us, but this time we've come to consult you about something. To put it correctly, when a joint hurts, you're told to get used to it and think, my mom was like this and my grandma too. Why should I worry?
Especially with this genetic factor, you so easily experience joint pain and you don't even realize that maybe you're 26 or 30 and you're already getting accustomed to aches in various places. Sometimes they appear and disappear. Other times we all feel them as part of these inflammatory diseases. You get a urinary infection, you get a respiratory virus during this flu season, and all kinds of pulmonary infections which cause inflammation throughout the body, affecting your muscles. Your whole body aches, your joints hurt, you feel like your hands could use a massage, and your feet. Or you say, I'm tired, I've been shopping a lot, I've been on my feet a lot, and my feet hurt. The problem is that we wrongly become accustomed to a pain that shouldn't exist, not even during an acute illness of this nature. We normally shouldn't be experiencing body pains from inflammation, because that's a significant indication that all of this inflammation within our bodies doesn't just affect the joints we're discussing today, but it also impacts our blood vessels, our heart, its valves, and it even affects our neurons. Any disease like this, chronic inflammation, which can stem from many causes cells to age, and this is how cancer can develop. So we must never get used to pain or inflammation.
What exactly does chronic mean? When should I actually start to feel concerned? Let's imagine I slipped and fell, injuring my leg or perhaps my hand, and the pain continues to persist after a week or even 2.
The definitions are different, but acute is when in the very first days, we should be able to heal the pain, for the inflammation to disappear, to vanish completely. Certainly, an inflammatory process when we've injured a specific area is quite natural, because it actually speeds up the healing process. Our body actively fights against that specific injury, and to address it, it sends cells to the affected area, bringing about inflammation to resolve the underlying problem. If this condition becomes self-perpetuating and starts to persist for an extended period, then it clearly indicates that we are facing a significant issue. However, if the underlying cause is something entirely different and not a direct result of a physical trauma, and I'm starting to get neck pain, shoulder pain, just aches. You see, our joints and our bones, we must understand that they are not just inert things. They are they are alive, they are, even though they're rigid, yes, they also have some elasticity, we'll see, but they are cells that constantly bring new bone tissue. The more you stimulate it with physical exercise, the bone adapts, the more weight is applied, the more pressure. It is an organ, and the bone develops based on its function. If the function in that area is correct, I will have a healthy bone. So, as I was saying, there are cells that continuously build and deposit bone, and cells that destroy that bone and mobilize calcium, phosphorus, which we need in our blood. That's why it's very important that a non-balanced diet will always affect my bone metabolism. Joints aren't simply inert connecting things. You see, we have joint surfaces lubricated by a fluid produced right here, and sleeves covering them, so these bones, moving dozens of times daily, don't wear out. These are made of collagen. These joints are encased in layers that provide support. They contain both collagen and elastin. All of these are added or removed from them depending on hormones.
But isn't it also age-dependent? Because there are people who suffer from osteoarthritis due to the fact that they waited until the bone was damaged.
It has completely worn out because testosterone and estrogen, as I was saying, the primary male and female hormones, play a significant role not only on the surface of the skin to ensure that the skin remains elastic, but also in the bone tissue and, most importantly, the joint tissue. And so, if we've started to pass the age of 27 or 30, and these hormone secretions are testosterone and estrogens already begin to decline, that we must think differently about protecting our joints, so that when we reach the age of our mothers or grandmothers, we don't have problems, or at least not too early in life. errors that are committed, which primarily impact this entire hormonal system, throwing it out of balance and diminishing the secretion of testosterone in the testicles and estrogen in the ovaries. Now, the main cause is smoking. So, if you are able, please try to eliminate this smoking habit as quickly as possible, because it deposits inflammatory markers within your body and it causes significant inflammation in all your joint areas. But even more critically, it completely disrupts the secretion of both testosterone and estrogen, which will invariably affect the capacity for that fluid, which lubricates your joints and their surrounding structures, to properly regenerate. We are starting to have problems because they are becoming more lax. And how would that be? You know, that habit of cracking your knuckles doesn't affect you. It's impolite, doesn't encourage it, but on the other hand, when you make these movements, you see, we have joints in our fingers too, and they start to stretch those fine joint capsules excessively, making them much looser, much more permissive, causing the bone ends to separate. And then it's possible that in this way, you might start to promote an inflammation in that area, which we truly don't desire. I don't know, did you happen to know, for instance, that the saturated fats found in those hydrogenated products like margarine, you eat ice cream, you enjoy ice cream, you like these snack sticks and all sorts of puffed snacks and all kinds of chips and these fast foods that contain hydrogenated fats. This will always cause a destructive process at the joint level. It's not about eating it once, but if I regularly consume it and replace a complex, healthy meal with these hydrogenated fats, I should expect all these fine structures within the joints, you see, that surround the joints, all these bone connections. In the foot alone, we take up home. We have, say, many small bones all articulated with each other. And you can imagine that an inflammatory process in this area will immediately affect it. Another thing that affects us is our incorrect posture. The primary cause of neck pain often stems from the delicate articulation of the cervical vertebrae or the way we position our shoulders. We tend to sit at our desks with our shoulders hunched forward. We strain our muscles. The musculature then repositions itself, the chest muscles, these pectorals, these muscles of the back, and automatically the joints are in a poor position. We look at our mobile phone. Raoul Kilpor, what to recall that I've always said this and time and again, with him on my lap, I'd be writing quite a lot, or at the office computer with my elbows propped up right on the table. Your joints are going to be affected. The nerves that pass through here, right behind the joints, will also be impacted, but the joints themselves will be especially affected. Those who work extensively with a computer mouse, often placing their joint directly on the table, should really use a small cushion. This will help protect both the nerves in this area and their joints from an unhealthy, detrimental position. And always make sure your spine remains straight, sit upright and properly on your chair, not with your legs squeezed together, and never cross your legs. Always look directly at the screen, straight ahead, with your shoulders relaxed. Always make sure to check your posture, and at least once every hour or an hour and a half, try to move around and then recheck your posture. This is important to protect your joints, as they truly need functional blood vessels. Thus, say this.
A question coming from others who are considering enrolling their children in fencing and tennis. These are sports that primarily, or rather predominantly, use one limb. Is it advisable to do something like this?
It's only good if I do the preparatory training sessions and do them professionally with professional coaches. They will know that they must ensure very good vascularization. That's what is important.
I saw the fencer whose right side, hand included, was double the other.
Yes, and then you realize that that even the body's entire support structure becomes unbalanced because the bones of the pelvis begin to shift. One leg becomes noticeably longer while the other grows more, and this causes the spine to become misaligned, leading to a whole series of pains of this particular type. Sport itself, if you're doing it in an improper position, in a certain way, it's very good to the sports. I've even recommended it to you. And if you are experiencing joint inflammation. Physical activity is important because, as I was explaining earlier, the hormones themselves, should their quality significantly decline, these very hormones will begin to affect the vascularization, preventing these crucial joints from being able to regenerate properly. Similarly, exercise, when performed correctly, promotes the vascularization of these capsules, their recovery and healing, their lubrication, and the regeneration of collagen and elastin structures within this particular structure. But if
you're using an improper body position, consider a squat, how incorrectly it's performed, placing strain upon your knees with your entire body's weight concentrated in an awkward, uncomfortable stance, and you're not utilizing the correct joint angles, you'll soon discover that quite easily. A sport that should be good for you is actually doing you more harm by affecting all the stresses in your ligaments and joints.
Here's another thing that you must do. You don't just jump right into it. The exercise is excellent for losing weight, but if you're obese, you already weigh 90 to 100 kilograms.
Just think, there's a phenomenally high pressure on these joints. So we don't just start running, we don't run. We begin with cycling, we begin with some challenging exercises. We manage our diet in the kitchen until we reach a weight that's comfortable for our joint system, and only then do we start with other types of exercises. Did you know that sugar acts directly against your joints? Because it can lead to metabolic syndrome, it increases insulin resistance, it doesn't provide good calories, it brings empty calories just to make you gain weight. You're becoming obese. Any extra weight? Many of you have been to the doctor with back and joint problems, and they told you to lose at least 5 kilograms. Did you lose 5 kilograms?
You're getting closer to your ideal weight, and you've seen how good it is on you.
At that moment, the joint begins to recover. Carbonated drinks also cause an inflammatory syndrome, especially those stimulant-type beverages, the black carbonated ones. You'll see that it mobilizes, it completely disrupts calcium metabolism, the absorption of calcium in the intestine, of phosphorus and of phosphates. There's an entire series of metabolic and renal changes that expel calcium, phosphorus, and so on from our circulation, demineralizing our bones and primarily affecting our bone attachments.
That these articulations, these joints, are attached to these sheets which are inserted onto the bone. At this insertion point, inflammation and pain occur.
And even more, the flour, specifically white flour. If you consume white flour or products made from white flour, that could be the reason your joints have started to bother you, to feel numbness, to feel pain in your joints.
Because a great many of the food intolerances, such as gluten intolerance or the intolerance to any other type of food, produce antibodies against that specific food. And you start to develop an immune pathology in that area, triggering, especially if you have some inherited genetic factors, a rheumatoid arthritis that begins to affect these small bones, these tiny joints in your fingers, and you'll see how your fingers start to deform.
Just take a look at James Coburn. If you ever get the chance, just observe James Coburn's hands. Edith Piaf was exactly the same way.
You see, you have to observe how the joints are becoming deformed, because here inflammatory processes have taken place, and which perhaps at their very core had some gluten intolerances, food intolerances that went completely unnoticed until then, and which chronically over many years triggered an immune response throughout the entire body.
There's also the genetic factor involved. You'll find that there are certain genes that should be tested in this situation, especially if your grandmother, mother, or grandfather experienced these kinds of problems. Have your intolerance test done, have your rheumatic disease test done, or if you had a whole series of throat infections during childhood, swollen tonsils, a child who was constantly given injections by the family doctor, the pediatrician.
You were afraid of that syringe because it always came to give you antibiotics, but perhaps you had not only respiratory viruses, but this is especially for mothers. Look at your children. If they have these spots in their throat when their tonsils are swollen and red, yellow spots that usually indicate streptococcus, that if this condition isn't treated correctly and for a very long time, throughout their entire childhood and youth, it will affect the joints, leading to a rheumatic disease. Certainly the heart is also at risk, but for now, we are focusing on the joints, and you will understand why. It is absolutely essential to get an ASLO test. You must periodically check the erythrocyte sedimentation rate and the C-reactive protein levels.
Inflammation will be visible, and if inflammatory markers are elevated, that's a definite cardiovascular disease risk that needs to be considered and addressed. Alcohol is also very pro-inflammatory. You'll see that even these diets, which appear to be good for your health and which recommend that vegetable oils should not be consumed in excess. For example, flaxseed oil or other purely plant-based vegetable oils have a poor ratio of various omegas, with too much omega-9, which is pro-inflammatory.
That's why it's good to balance. A healthy joint needs to be well and function as it should. Nourish it with omega acids, but from a fish source. So you need to include in your diet salmon, mackerel, and sardines, steamed. Don't cook them at excessively high temperatures. Better yet, use a steam oven. Under no circumstances should they be fried. Absolutely never fry them in oil.
Are there such things as bad vegetables?
What did you
bad
say?
Vegetables.
Yes, there actually are bad vegetables. For example, if you eat tomatoes and then your joints start to ache. Or for example, very often this happens at this joint of the foot. Generally, a pain appears here in your big toe and it swells, inflames and reddens. Yes, you see some uric acid deposits there, which you need to test in your blood, especially if it's the disease of King's. If you eat a significant amount of young animal meat, it can also be quite subtle at first, and then gradually it began to manifest as a more discreet sign. Then you get gout attacks affecting your joint. So it might be a finger, but typically your big toe causing this inflammation. You control it, remove uric acid food sources from your diet, and add vitamin E, omega oils. Da să satebe serving of almonds or peanuts every day. Use broccoli, use organic foods, dairy for quality calcium and essential vitamin D. You really should consider using turmeric. Just put a small amount into your fruit or even your vegetable smoothie, because you're going to find out that it's incredibly pro-anti-inflammatory, meaning it actively promotes our body's own internal mechanisms that effectively regulate inflammation. Because this inflammation, which can be triggered by any of the dietary mistakes you might make, has the potential to either worsen an existing problem or even give rise to a new joint issue. And why not an apple a day, which I know is said to keep the doctor away? Let's hope you won't have any problems. Satesa. You'll see the quercetin in this apple plays an essential role in joint metabolism.
We extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Ovidiu Beneshu Hășafua Seșca, who underwent extensive schooling and learned hundreds of tiny bones. He learned about carpals, metacarpals, tarsals, and metatarsals just to tell us. I kindly ask you, please, try to stay healthy so you can remain my friends.